Thank you all for coming. As I'm sure, well I hope all of you know, International Women's Day is the 8th of March. And in celebration of that, Lucinda Carney has very kindly agreed to come and give us a talk today. For those of you that don't know, Lucinda is responsible for something called the HR Uprising podcast, which I will confess I hadn't heard of until I saw the posters and saw that Lucinda was coming in. But I am now an avid listener. And I have to say, listening to HR Uprising podcasts on the morning train journey beats reading about the latest coronavirus-19 update and the depressing news in the FT at the moment. So this morning I think it was building teams, setting up teams, and also the what does the CEO want from HR?
Maybe I have to interview you, get you up next time.
I'm not going to wait to see what I do now. Get me on. Anyway, so a brief background on Lucinda. So Lucinda is a chartered occupational psychologist, and after spending a number of years in corporate HR, set up her own organisational development consultancy called Advanced Change in 2008. And out of Advanced Change came Actus in 2012, which is a very successful HR software system. And in recognition of Lucinda's success as a businesswoman, she was awarded the Every Woman Entrepreneur of the Year in 2016. And for those of you who don't know the Every Woman organisation, it's a professional body that drives the success of women in business. And then I think you launched HR Uprising in
last year, yes. I'm very impressed.
Okay, so it's fresh off the press.
You're well briefed.
Hopefully after this you'll see an uptick in subscribers. I thoroughly recommend it. It's there's some good insights on it. With that, I will thank you again. And
thank you very much, Martin. That's very impressed with your briefing there. I was just to get my. So I'll just test. The screen's disappeared. Does that mean Cape Town have gone? Back in. Hopefully you'll be coming back. I won't worry too much. Thank you very much for having me here, and thank you for inviting us. Our links also was to do with last year. Georgia and I, our paths crossed when we were talking about the women in technology last year. So that's how we came across each other. So the purpose of this really is just to bring everybody together, and I'm really delighted, although the initiative, if you like, is triggered by International Women's Day, this is all about everybody working together. It's about collaboration, and my view is that it is about us all working together. So I hope there's information that's applicable to men and women and everyone else in terms of this presentation. As Martin went through earlier, in terms of my background, I spent about 18 years in corporate learning and development roles. I actually started out in sales and in the pharmaceutical industry. So I worked for... Should I just keep going? Sorry about that. So I started out with pharmaceuticals, and then I went to Siemens, and I was in the telecoms industry for about 10 years. In 2009 I left and set up on my own. In terms of this journey, it's interesting. If anyone wants to talk about your future careers and things like that at the end, it's something that the ethos that we're going to talk to in this presentation, I think I've done along the way, and I was lucky that because I was involved in learning and development, I've always been able to do a certain amount of personal development. And some of the things I've picked up, I think, really helped me to take opportunities. And I think this is what this is about, is whoever we are, wherever we are, we should try and take opportunities ourselves, but also provide them to other people. So with that in mind, I set up an organisational consultancy in 2009, and then moved into a software house. And that's partially naivety. I think my friends who know me would go, how on earth have you ended up running a software business? Very interesting. Well, because I was the customer. I suppose that was my link as to why I've ended up doing what I'm doing. And then moving forwards from this, the HR Uprising podcast, a lot of our customers are in HR learning and development, but actually this is about putting something back, because I've learned a lot of things over the years, and also through interacting with customers and speaking and all the people I've interacted with, there's lots of information that I found that is really helpful to share with others, so it's part of this putting back. Although it's called HR Uprising, actually, as Martin says, there are quite a lot of podcasts on there that are really relevant to people managers or just more generally. I'm going to touch on something called imposter syndrome, which is relevant to anybody. Even my kids were in the car yesterday saying, actually, Mummy, that's not too boring. So, not too boring is the key. I've just got, it sounds like this big I am, I'll move on from this, but the reason I'm sharing these things and standing up and being proud about them is that I had to probably overcome imposter syndrome myself to make myself get out there and do a podcast and get out there and write a book. So I have a book I'm going to be published on the 21st of May called How to Be a Change Superhero. And again, that was something I'd thought about for 10 years and then finally got up and did it. So you can be ancient. I feel sometimes quite ancient, and my kids think I'm ancient. I've got 2 kids, they're 16 and 13, various animals. I even play netball. I try to, not particularly well. So I try to have a relatively balanced life, and I enjoy my life. And I feel really lucky to be here talking to you, and I hope that you'll take a few tips and make sure you make the most out of your careers as well as a result. So what I wanted to talk about in terms of the agenda today is putting imposter syndrome to bed. Just who has heard of imposter syndrome in the room? Just feel, everybody very well educated. Okay, and part of this, how can we do this? One of these is about responsibility, and I'll talk a bit about what I mean by personal responsibility. The second aspect of it is being aware of what your circle of influence consists of and how you can expand your circle of influence. Anyone come across or heard of the book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey? Yeah, so if you've heard of that or read it or listened to it, because actually the book's quite thick, I was thinking the audio is quite good. Some of these terms that I'm using here, you'll find that I attribute to Stephen Covey. I'm not saying they're my own. In fact, very little in personal development is unique or fresh. It's just actually about us processing it and having it at the right time, I think, for us, wherever we are in our lives. And it's about also how we can then take our personal power, being aware that every single person in this room and in Cape Town, particularly in Cape Town, see if they can hear us, we've all got personal power that we can share with others and make the most of and collaborate throughout the whole business as well, which is great to be part of an international business here. So that's what I want to cover. So, imposter syndrome, the fear of being found out. As I said earlier on, I started out in pharmaceutical, then when I moved into Siemens, which was telecoms, I went into a training role. I was in a standalone training role, and I was quite quickly made into a manager role. And I remember sitting around a table with about 12 other people, 11 men, and they turned to me, and they were all sales experts, quite experienced and older than me, and said, let's hear what the training expert has to say on this matter. And there was no sarcasm at all. They genuinely saw me as a training expert. And I had this, in fact, even now it's having a little shiver. I had this moment of, oh my God, they're going to find out. I don't really know what I'm talking about. They've given me this job and I don't feel at all expert. And I think most of us will have that experience at some point. That is something I really still remember now, 20 years later. And the key is what we do with that feeling and acknowledge it, that actually it's really, really common and really natural. So I wanted us to all feel that we can identify when we're having these thoughts and feelings and know how we can help ourselves and others with them. So in actual fact, 70% of people are said to experience imposter syndrome, so you're almost in the minority if you never do, at some point in our lives. And so that's normal. I'd almost say that's a sensible level of modesty, right, to make sure we're not infallible about things. And contrary to popular thought, both men and women suffer from it. And that's what I think is really interesting, because when it was originally discovered, it was back in the 70s, obviously times were quite different in the 70s professionally, but it was thought that just people, or high-performing women, or very senior women experienced it. But in reality, at this sort of our early, mid-stages of our careers, we're just as likely to experience it if we're male or female. So I thought that's an interesting first takeaway. So don't just assume that just because a woman's there that they're going to be feeling it or a male is. But there is a difference in terms of how men and women react. I don't know the reason for these differences, and we could speculate, but the reality is it seems that men are much more likely to feel it and then maybe get a sponsor or somebody to support them and still go for a role. They're less likely to let it hold them back. And that is also supported, if any of you have seen, there's some research around if two people of the opposite gender looked at a job description, a female is more likely to look at the things she can't do and maybe not apply for it than a man who may go, actually, well, I can do those things. And actually that's just a mindset difference, and some of that's what I'm going to talk to here. I think we all should feel entitled to apply the same mindset and have the same results there. So the difference is that men and women are likely to go through it, may push through it more. So the guys may already have a better support network or be better at asking for that support than the women are at early stages. But then when you get into more senior roles, it seems that women are more likely to be feeling the imposter sense at that stage, and the men may feel more comfortable in that role. So that's what some of the evidence is, and I've put references if anyone really wants to read up on this further. I think it's quite interesting. The point is, really, any of us could experience it, and we should maybe be alert to supporting each other in overcoming something like that, and we can think in a moment about how we can do that, so whatever our gender. Okay, sorry. Oops, sorry, I clicked too much. Now, the reason we want to do something about it, it doesn't just happen internally. There are lots of impacts that we want to avoid in terms of things. So people may not speak up, so we may miss out on ideas, on creativity. And obviously this is just one thing that can stop people from speaking up. We've all got different personalities. So more introverted people also need to be given the opportunity to share their ideas and speak up. We've all got differences. But the point is, if people don't feel, if they feel a bit of an imposter, they may not share their ideas, even though they are perfectly legitimate. May not complete important projects. That one surprised me. So actually people may be less likely to deliver. So if you are working with someone who you know has the potential, but they're not finishing it, they're not performing, is it actually that they're almost trying to fail or trying to self-sabotage in some way? Because it might be causing that. Is there a different way? Would we need to coach them or support them? They haven't gone for a project they secretly wanted. This was a gender one, which was quite interesting, that actually some women particularly appeared to be less likely to go and ask for a pay rise or a promotion than go and apply elsewhere. So any of us with HR hats on, is there anyone who is HR in this room? Anyone with HR? The hats on? Oh, nodding, familiar. I've got a familiar space here. But actually it seems that there is a tendency, rather than have the embarrassment of maybe failing, and so then a female might be more likely to go and apply for a different job to get a pay rise. So these were interesting, and loads of us would feel worried or anxious. These are the sort of behaviours if imposter syndrome has become too much. And I often say that any behaviour, a little bit of it is quite good, probably. It has a purpose, as I say. A bit of imposter syndrome keeps you feet on the ground, right? You know, it's useful to keep your things in proportion. But too much of it can lead to perfectionism, procrastination, paralysis, where you can't move forward, or people-pleasing, overly trying to people-please. So these are things for us to look out for, and how can we avoid them and just watch out for it in others. I did mention that I was a trainer originally, my background, and being a trainer, it never leaves you. Now, they've not given me a flip chart, so you're forgiven for that, but what I am going to ask you to do is a little bit of interaction. So thank you where the hands have been going up. This was just a very light bit of interaction. Just want you to chat with somebody in your vicinity, so 2s and 3s. Have you ever personally experienced imposter syndrome or noticed it in others? And I'm just interested, I'll just give you 2 or 3 minutes, just have a little chat as to how it's been for you. primary school, so it works. Or Girl Guides or something. All right, thank you very much for being so responsive, and lots of energy going on there. Now here's the kicker. Is anyone prepared to give an example? It doesn't have to be, it could be a friend that you want to give an example. Anyone got an example that they'd be prepared to share? No? Thank you. Come on.
When I ever go to a job interview, even if I've got loads of experience in the thing that they're talking about, like even here, I'll still feel like maybe I'm just like lying and I'm not.
You feel like you actually feel like you're lying?
Yeah, I feel like, oh, maybe I'm just not as good as it as what I'm implying, but actually I do have that experience.
So it's quite hard to sell yourself, isn't it, when that's going on in your head? And is that just something that you're saying to yourself? It's a sort of, is it words in your head? It's not just me that has words in the head, right? It's sort of saying, oh, well, maybe I'm not good enough, that kind of voice? Those sort of voices. Absolutely. I think lots of us have had that experience, right? Anyone else got an example? Be brave. Thank you, gentleman at the back.
I guess we're often on the phone to clients, they have particular questions, and I think more often than not I'm thinking, how do I say this in such a way that they'll leave me alone? Whereas actually you can flip that around pretty quickly and say, how do I say this in a way that gives them what they need, and that I sound authoritative on, and then they kind of.
So is that where you're having to be the expert to the client?
Yeah, we were talking about this quite a lot, and there is a kind of expectation on us to kind of provide some information, and we often feel, why are we being asked for this? Why am I in this job?
Yes. So I don't know if this is similar. I'm just going to step back to make sure the Cape Town guys can still hear. Could you hear that was an example of someone perhaps not feeling, well, they weren't quite sure why they were being asked that, or actually do I have all the information? I mean, you guys do regulatory things, don't you? And so there's a real onus on you to be up to date with the latest regulations. So it's quite pressured, I imagine, as well, in terms of knowing what the laws are and that side of things, in terms of it's not just an opinion, they're expecting you to have the most up-to-date facts and figures. And certainly I've got someone in our team, we now in our software, we have a module that goes into financial services for regulation, and a member of the team, she knows as much as anyone else about it because it's a new regulation, but she feels incredibly uncomfortable about it, and it's a bit of imposter because you're being asked questions and you feel like you should be the expert there and feel uncomfortable, so you want more knowledge. But actually it's remembering that actually we're just as expert as the next person in principle, or telling ourselves those positives. I'm probably pushing it to take an example from Cape Town, am I, because they are on mute? No? Is there anything from Cape Town that you'd like to share? Have you got an example, anyone?
Anybody? Nothing here, we're all good, thank you.
You didn't think I was going to do that to you, did you? Alright, I might expect one with 2 more interactive bits, so you just got to give us 1 interaction next time. You can get a prime example.
Nothing from really good. Thanks.
Okay, I'll move on. The problem is... Oh, we have got one. Oh, Brazil's got one. Please go for it. Hi. How exciting! The hard thing for me is I have to look at you there, but I want to look at you here, which is very confusing. What's your example, guys?
No, we're not mute. No, we're okay.
We can hear you.
Oh, we're not muted? Yeah, we can't hear them.
No example.
Christian, we can hear you. We're going on mute so we don't get the echo, so go ahead.
We were just saying we have nothing to add.
Is that because you feel like you're an imposter in this meeting?
Okay, well we'll keep going, This is like animals, this is a new thing, isn't it? You shouldn't work with animals, so what's the other one? And now, international. Alright, so is my slide, my slide's moving, that's a good start. Alright, so how can we overcome this? So I've taken the mnemonic RISE because that's really convenient and fits with the points I was going to make, and also fits with the HR uprising, so I was very pleased with this aspect of it. The first R of RISE is responsibility. And it'll be about us taking responsibility for where these feelings come from, for if we experience imposter syndrome, taking responsibility for the fact that actually we can choose to think something different. And as you were saying earlier, you're actually thinking, how can I flip this round? Sorry, I don't know your name, gentleman at the back. You're actually consciously thinking, these thoughts are not helping me. How can I flip these thoughts round to think something more helpful when I've got a customer on the phone? The second one is about how, once we've taken responsibility, we can consider, in terms of helping ourselves and others, how we can expand our circle of influence, how we can work with others to be more powerful, basically, as opposed to contract and think internally. Then my advocation is it's about spreading the word. It's about getting out there, it's about talking to others. You've got a community here, we've got communities overseas. How can we bridge communications, geographical, demographic gaps and just expand our thinking and our opportunities? And then finally, it's about how can we enable others. So this is about, once we go beyond ourselves, how can we put something back and actually enable others to also get more out of things. It was problem, so unfair, teenager. It's so unfair. I've got all this homework to do. This is Sunday afternoon, at the end of half term. All right, it's so unfair. I've got all this homework to do, and I've got all this revision because she's got GCSEs. And I'm like, well, is it really unfair? Well, yeah, because I've got it all to do by tomorrow. But actually, how much time do you have to do it? And so you can imagine she didn't get a huge amount of sympathy because she had to text, how many hours have you spent on Netflix this half term? How many hours have you spent talking to your friends on social media this half term? And begrudgingly, but she's actually not too bad because she has been hearing this mantra for a while, she realised she wasn't going to get any sympathy because she had chosen how to spend her half term. And the fact that she had all of the homework at the end of half term still to do that she'd had at the start of half term wasn't really unfair. It was actually down to the choices she'd made in how she spent her time. Now, of course, she didn't really want to swallow that because that's accepting responsibility for the fact that she's not, excuse me, although you could argue she hadn't made choices because she was just acting. She was just being a teenager, right? She was just doing what she wanted to do in the here and now. She was actively not making choices as to how she wanted to spend her time. So if we take responsibility, what we need to do is actually think in the here and now, what is the best choice I can make in the moment, whether it's about how I spend my time. It's a great example with time management. And actually, if I want to be able to be relaxed and watch Netflix, I want without having the stress, because she is someone who gets stressed by last minute things, then I need to schedule it in earlier. But she had to accept responsibility that it was no one else's fault but her own. She had made choices. Now, many people out there, you hear about a victim mindset, people having a victim mentality. Those are the people that they don't want to take responsibility. They always want it to be someone else's fault as to why they're in that position. You know, if someone, sometimes the trains are late, but I still have to take responsibility. I could have chosen to take an earlier train if I'm running late. There's various situations in terms of the environment that we work in. Let's say people are very negative around us. We can get sucked into that, or we can make choices as to who we spend our time with and the sorts of behaviours we have. In terms of imposter complex, a lot of this is about our conditioning. So the example we had earlier is that we have voices in our head, and I've been assured that it really isn't just me who has voice in my head. But they say that sometimes those voices in our heads are really down to our very early conditioning. So when we were younger than 7, and people who are talking to us, our parents, those around us who are influential, might have said, you're never going to be any good at that, or you can do this, you're no good at maths. There's things that we've been told that we might have taken on board that we then think are real. And that maybe is something, in my view, that might supplement our thoughts about imposter complex. Now, we still have a choice to go, hang on a minute, is that real? So when I was 28 in that room, and I felt uncomfortable about being an expert, and then I reflected back, well, actually, I had been doing training for 5 years, none of them were training experts. I'd got a master's and a degree in psychology, which had got a learning module in there, and probably I was got as much common sense as the next person. So in terms of the expert, then I had a level of expertise to add there. So it was about me being aware, and I think this is being aware of those voices in our heads, or those feelings, and maybe taking a step back and examining them to see, are they actually real? Are they mine? Are they robust, or could I challenge any of them? So that would be one of my main things here, is trying to start with us. That does mean taking responsibility. So if you're not happy with the situation you're in, and believe me, I realise that there are lots of people who have terrible situations. There's lots of examples out there, though, of people who've overcome adversity with bad situations. If you think about Nelson Mandela, when he was on Robben Island, there was a lot of pressure on him to be quite disruptive. They weren't given very great facilities. But what he chose, instead he decided he wanted to teach. So he took a very positive mindset. You hear lots of examples of people who've been in difficult examples like concentration camps, where they have found the ability, even when they couldn't control anything about their circumstances, to choose a constructive mindset. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, because it's actually easier to blame. But when we accept that our mindset may not be helping us all that much and take responsibility, then it also gives us choices to change things. So almost whatever the circumstances, there may have been other issues that have conspired to get us in a certain position. If we start by thinking, right, I'm the only one who can change my mindset, and then let's condition ourselves the other way. So if I go, do you know what, I was really brave, I stood up and I pushed my idea forward today, then I go, I'm really proud of myself. Right? So we start telling ourselves positive things, putting some new words into our head that are reinforcing the positives. And we get rid of the blame and excuses. We find ourselves making excuses, making blame, so, okay, I made the choice. In hindsight, it wasn't the best choice, but I still made the choice, and that means I can make a different choice tomorrow. It's about us learning and moving forwards. So that's the idea around responsibility. Does that make sense? The next area, and after this we'll do a little chat bit again, is once I've taken responsibility, then I can think about how can I influence my circumstances, right? So if I've got the power, what I can do is think about what can I do? So when I'm going, I can't do that, I'm not good enough, all of that is basically shrinking my ability, shrinking my positivity, and shrinking my ability to be the best person I can be. Whereas if we think about possibilities and just flip that language in our head, okay, so what can I do? Where am I good in that CV? You know, what do I know in regard to the challenges that I've asked, or who could I ask to check my knowledge? So where could I find this from? All of those are future-focused possibilities and options questions. So we can flip that language in our heads, and all of a sudden, opportunities are rising for us. Opportunities is much more constructive. If you've ever had coaching, or if you coach someone, that will be much more. The difference between possibly coaching and counselling is counselling might be where's the problem come from, whereas coaching is let's just flip it and go, okay, what can we do instead? So if you want to self-coach or coach others, then these are the sort of questions. If someone you're with is suffering from imposter complex, so who can you work? How can you get help? What might make a difference? That's much better language. And then I really loved this picture here. So the circle of influence is something that Covey talks about. And you think about it like ripples in a pond. The point is, if we're thinking that sort of negativity, then what we're just going to do is we're going to end up just stuck in the middle in the smallest, least powerful position where the rocks are. Now, if I wanted to get a new role or make a difference in terms of expanding, getting greater opportunities, now, maybe I don't know anybody who's going to be interviewing me for that role or who's in that particular office, let's say, but I might know someone who does. So the idea here is think about the people who are the ripples outside, just on the periphery of your circle of influence. How can you talk to them? How can you influence them? Now, of course, if you start working on the edge of your periphery of circle of influence, what happens to it? Expands, absolutely. Whereas if you work on the inside, you contract. So it's a basic principle of actually work on the edge and you start stretching. It's a bit like if you're doing exercise. They say you sort of work on the edge of your capability and you'll get fitter. Whereas actually if you're really underneath, then you're not going to get any fitter. It's that kind of thing. Now I was thinking, who's a good example of this currently? And I thought Greta Thunberg. Wow. Right? So she felt strongly about climate change. So what did she do? She took responsibility and she decided that she personally, and I think some of her friends, were going to strike from schools. Now then what happened? other people took notice. So she was striking, she was being a role model in regard to this, other people noticed, other people started in Sweden, started doing it. So her influence grew. Then what happened, people, I mean, I remember my kids talking about it, so people in other countries heard about it, and they started striking. A very attractive idea, of course, to school children, to strike in climate change activism. But they started doing it, so her circle of influence was becoming global, and then she spoke at the UN. So that's just an example of sometimes just by taking responsibility for what you believe in, standing up and being counted, and acting in a certain way, you can then have a knock-on to other people, and your expanse can really grow. So it's about, therefore, being a positive role model, remaining positive. If you choose to behave like that, then you're going to get that expansion in terms of your responsibility and also your opportunities. You can't always, I mean, to a certain extent, maybe me doing the podcast has enabled us to scale, because you can't always influence people directly, but then you can, the more people then start listening to things, they then talk to other people, and you have this sort of knock-on effect. So it is a way in which you can think about how can I scale, be more influential, working on the outside of my capability there. Excuse me, clearing my throat, but I'm not frogging it. So, my question to everybody in your groups, and I thought I'm going to really mix it up this time. Now, Kate and Rio, you're fine in terms of this, you can make it up yourselves. I'm going to ask you, just for fun, lots of you will have, if you reach under your seats, it's like pantomime time. You're going to have a post-it which has a colour on it. So your challenge is, and if you're on the benches, you won't have one, so you can find someone you can number it there, so you can mix up. So how about go and find someone, 2 or 3 other people. You can stand up for this in a couple of minutes. Who's got the same colour post-it as you? And have anything we've covered before? Options that we can do to enable or share, because others might be able to learn from you. Tips. Thank you.
We do think about as some more informal mentoring or coaching relationships. There is a mentoring program for this, but it's often quite hierarchical. More senior people mentoring more junior people, and often there is an advantage in speaking to somebody at your sort of level within an organisation, just being able to ask, I'm having this problem, can you just reassure me that it's working your job? I'm not the idiot. Reminding yourself you are capable, or having somebody reminding you that you are capable of doing your job according to your experience.
Absolutely. So just for the benefit of those guys overseas, the example here is just a really great one, which is informal mentoring. Let's do more of that. And I think it's as simple as just working with a peer. And one point actually, linking to imposter complex, the whole thing about coaching versus mentoring. Generally, a mentor is somebody who has seniority and they have expert knowledge in a certain area. A coach doesn't have to have any expert knowledge. They just are good at listening and asking questions. And if we think about those questions that we asked on the second slide, which was what could you do? You know, what is the problem? What have you thought about? Now, in fairness, you can do both as informal, because you may, well, I've tried this. You can share examples. But it's sometimes we're so busy, but isn't it nice you've got these little booths and things? Sometimes let's go for a coffee, and it's solving those problems of spending a bit of time with somebody. You know, can I just have a chat to you? Can I pick your brains on that? And people are genuinely very happy to help. So think to ask and think to give, and that would be, I think that's a great way of doing things, a great idea. Has anyone got anything else?
Like encouraging and asking people to come to networking events with you. So say you're going to something, actually going along with someone else. You've got so much to learn from both many people doing it. People take different approaches to meeting new people, and it actually also gives you quite a lot of comfort and confidence in it.
Love it. So the example there was inviting someone else to come along to a networking event with you, and that works. That works in many ways, because some people feel very. It's quite intimidating going something on your own as well, isn't it? So if you take someone with you, now you've got sort of strength in numbers, but you're expanding it, and that's a great idea. So inviting someone, taking someone with you to something. It's great. Anything else? Okay. Anything from overseas? Cape Town still feeling
Yeah, on
quiet?
the Cape Town side, we had a few good discussions there. The one specifically related to when you are building relationships and you're really listening to someone, and they mention they might want to develop self-confidence or speaking skills, and you're browsing the net and you come across a website with some useful tips. You send it along to a person and you say, no, I found this, I came across it, I thought it might be helpful to you, why don't you have a look? And then that way also just assisting and enabling them.
And that's great. You do that internally, you could also do that with your network. It's just thinking of that's that whole expansive thing, isn't it? Thinking beyond. And you know what? That's really going to increase your own circle of influence because people would remember you going the extra mile to do that. So that's a really nice example. Thank you. Okay, right. Well, in the interest of time, as it's 13:58, I'm going to use the opportunity to wrap up. I think we've finished. The point is really, we can all rise up together. Let's all inflate the balloon rather than deflate the balloon. It was quite simple in terms of that. It's about us taking personal responsibility. It's thinking about what we can influence and who we can influence. It's then about sharing it. So not just keeping it to ourselves. How can we spread the word, talk about it, role model it, challenge scarcity mentality, and then enabling others. So taking it the next step. So we take people with us. We have more balloons in terms of going forwards. So I hope they gave you something to think about. Thank you very much for being a very attentive audience today. Oh, I'm going to click on to, if you ever want to buy a book, I'll probably do a 99p offer. It's coming out on the 21st of May. Now, the only thing I'll say about this, you may not all, well, actually, it's relevant to everyone, but being a change agent, at some point in your careers, you probably will need to be a change agent. And being a change agent isn't necessarily being the person in HR responsible for delivering change or senior management. Being a change agent is someone who's driving the change, and it's individuals in their own organisation standing up and having the courage to make a change. So obviously that's what I'm about there, but actually being a change superhero for me is a bit of an analogy to do with the rise, is we can all be superheroes and we can all help each other be superheroes in terms of rising up and getting the most out of life. Thank you very much. I'm going to assume there's no questions. If there are any individual questions, don't worry, you've probably all got to go back to work. As I say, I'm assuming if there are any questions, I'm very happy to take them, but if you need to dash off, that's fine, or you can come and have a word with me separately if that's helpful.
Just on behalf of everybody here on the screens, Lucinda, thanks very much. There was some valuable insights in there, and I think, judging by the interaction, I think people found a lot of that useful. I have to confess, we are in that mid-year stage. So, given your promotion slide, I'm looking forward to my diary filling up. So I need to get to Alex to block that out before it fills up. But anyway, thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.